Welcome to the Big Book Study podcast for anyone and everyone interested in a spiritual way of life. We are a step study which meets each week on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can find our website at primarypurposebigbookstudy.com. I'm Tina from Idaho. We also have Dave from Oregon, Heather from Saskatchewan, Kathleen from Colorado, and Nicole from Texas. In our last podcast, we went through steps 4 and 5. We ended with the fifth step, promises, which I'm going to reread on page 75. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? If we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something, we will not let go. We ask God to help us be willing. And I pass.
Thanks, Tina. I'm Dave. I'm from Oregon. Step 6 has, compared to some of the other steps, fairly brief instructions, which sounds pretty simple. The report I heard someone who knew one of the authors of this book, when he was asked about it, though, said this is really, of all the steps, the epic step. Because he said it is the one where we either let go or we don't. And if we don't, if we keep clinging, as the paragraph says, to things that we will not let go to, we may not see the results or the progress that we are looking for. So it's a step that isn't done just once. It's a step that in my experience, we do over and over and over again. And that is to no longer listen to our mind tell us about the old ideas. No longer follow what our mind is telling us might be the thing that will work this time. And rather, we do something new. And that is, we turn to our higher power. And we do this over and over again, sometimes many, many times a day. And with that, I will pass. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. This is Kathleen. And yes, to follow on with what you just said about over and over again. And we also, we talk about in this program, and it's in the book many times about it requires this rigorous honesty. So we have to really, really be rigorously honest with ourselves. And this is something that we're not used to doing. This is not the way of life that we've had. So we need to deeply ask ourselves, have we forgotten something? Is there something I'm overlooking? And this is something that we will do in our step 10 over and over and over again. And our sponsors help us to look a little bit, beyond something we might not see. But we ask God to reveal to us. Have I forgotten something? Is there, um, have I, what does it say? Is my work solid? Have I skimped anything? Have I, you know, tried to just get through the process? Um, because we need help from God and from higher power and from, really asking ourselves over and over again, what's my part here? Did I miss something? Is there anything? Because it's all about, it's kind of like, how free do we want to be? And our freedom comes from how close we are to higher power. And the way that we do that is by taking inventories of ourselves and in our, in things that we're upset about and we're resentful about. Um and then, of course, there's other steps, which is being of service, but which is huge. But anyway, that's my share for now.
Thanks, Kathleen. This is Nicole, and yeah, we're building this foundation, this spiritual foundation, and as Dave said, if we're missing pieces, if we still think that we're going to be able to put one foot in our recovery and keep one foot over here in trying to control and manage someone else's behavior, let's say, if that's one of our things that we reach for ease and comfort, if that's one of our addictions, we're not going to be able to straddle both those worlds. So have we truly taken step one? Are we convinced that our lives have become unmanageable and that we need help and we can't do it alone, and that we can't continue doing what we've been doing? And so, going back through each of these steps, we kind of, as we go through step 6, we've been through step 4 and 5. So we're starting to have this awareness, all of these resentments that have been, collecting over an entire lifetime, having those resentments kind of flipped and beginning to take responsibility for our part in our relationships, in the actions that we've taken, in the harms that we've done, in our own behaviors. We think that we're going to get relief when the people that we resent come and apologize to us or come and correct the situation, but we really feel relief when we start to own our own behaviors and start to take responsibility. And so we have kind of this experience, this spiritual experience, this freedom, this lifting of these resentments that happens when we take that responsibility. And now, before we take these next steps forward, we're looking back and deciding, because all of this is a decision followed by action. Are we truly convinced that we can't do this on our own and that our lives are unmanageable and we are ready to move forward into the steps that are coming? Are we willing to grow in a closeness with a higher power and begin to understand our own personal higher power? Going back through each of the steps. And that's all I have. Thanks. I'll pass.
Thank you, Nicole. These questions at the bottom of page 75, I was told by my sponsor, all of these questions: is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? Are just asking us basically the same question for each. Have we worked the first 5 steps to the best of our ability at this point? And then these questions in the next paragraph, are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something, we will not let go. We ask God to help us be willing. So that is just a willingness now to work these steps for the rest of our lives. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Tina. I just wanted to comment on the fact that, if we still cling the instruction in that last sentence, if we still cling to something, we will not let go. We will ask God to help us be willing. And the instruction there is, we may have some resentment or something that we can't let go of. And the answer to that clinging is to turn to our higher power. And I think it's important that we note that, before recovery, higher power, if we have a relationship with higher power, it's often our last resort after we've tried every kind of human solution that we can think of or great idea. And what this is telling us is that in order for us to let God remove these things, we have to ask God to help us to be willing. And if we have no further comments, I'm going to move on to the next paragraph on 76. When ready, we say something like this: My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have then completed step 7. So taking step 7 is reciting this 7th step prayer that we find on page 76. And step 7 is, humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. And step 7 is all about that humility. And I think humility is a big part of this. In the 12 and 12, it talks for 6 pages on humility when it covers step 7. And our first kind of experience with humility in the program is when we admit that we're powerless over alcohol or over our addiction and our life is unmanageable. Our pain brings us to humility. And we finally get up the courage to ask for help from someone in the program that would be willing to sponsor us. I think we get another lesson in humility when we do steps 4 and 5, when we learn about these defects of character that they're talking about here. And we're humbled again because we finally are able to see ourselves clearly. We see what our motives are. We see what we've been dealing in. And it is very humbling. And so if we're going to let God do for us what we could not do for ourselves, we need to have humility. And that humility brings us to God's will and then moves us towards living in peace with others and ourselves. So that is, the purpose and the meaning behind that 7th step prayer is, again, we're trying to get a closer connection to our higher power, and we have the humility to say, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to let God do it for me. And I'll pass and open it up to comments.
Thank you, Heather. This is Tina in Idaho. This statement, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad, reminds me that God can use all of me. Even the things that seem bad from my small perspective can be used in some way. So I'm no longer making judgments about it. I'm just knowing that I'm turning my whole life over to my higher power. Even the things that I judge, and trusting that in higher power's hands, all of it can be helpful and useful. And then this statement, which stands in the way, every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. That's a radical change for most of us, this seventh step. We've been preoccupied with getting our way, with essentially getting what we want, getting attention, getting whatever, get. And this completely turns it on its head. And we start fulfilling our purpose. And we're starting to look at, how can I be useful in this world? How can I be and do what my higher power would have me be and do? And that next piece reinforces that. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. So I'm not here to do other people's bidding, and I'm not really here to do my ego's bidding. I'm here to get clear each 24 hours on what my higher power would have me be and do. And with that, I'll pass.
This is Kathleen. This part in the prayer, it's, basically usefulness. Remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. So now it's not, we're not number one. What we are now about, our lives are changing to being helpful and useful in what God wants, and being helpful and useful to our fellows. So we don't pray for ourselves anymore. We don't, our actions are not for ourselves, they're for God and for our fellows. So it's this, it's the opposite of this selfishness, this self-absorbed, self-pity state that we've been in. And as codependents, we don't know what that means, right? Because some people out there might be listening, and as a codependent, all you've ever done is help other people or put everybody else first. Our kids, our partners, our coworkers, our employers, our everything. But we have to learn what it really means. Because what we've been doing is, the very nature of being codependent is we are trying to get something when we're giving. And then we get pissed off because we've given and the other person hasn't given what we wanted, or as much as we wanted, or in the way that we wanted. And so what we're going to have to learn how to do is, as was said, give to give. But that will be our job. It will be, take away my difficulties, take away my character defects, so I can be useful to you, God, and to my fellows, not to me and then my fellows and then God. So with that, I pass.
Thanks, Kathleen. When I look at that statement in the prayer, every single defect which stands in the way of my usefulness, it comes up that maybe we can remember that not every single defect in every moment stands in the way. I remember so clearly understanding eventually that God can use every single thing that has ever taken place. In God's hands, it can be turned to good use. And the best example of that is how my own defects, as harmful as they have been to my own life and to the life of my family members and those around me, when put in God's hands, particularly in the process of working with others, that is the very point of connection that's established. Without those defects, there would be no point of connection. I would have no experience with the struggles and the misery and the problems. But I do, and the people who need help need to hear from somebody who does and who has, and hear hope that even though that's been the case, all that misery, all that harm, all those things, that there is a path and there is a way to recovery, and there's a way to freedom, and there's a way to be helpful and useful to others despite all those things. And so when we're praying, remove those things which stand in the way of our usefulness. The purpose of all this is so that God can use all of it, good and bad, as it says here, to be helpful and useful to others. With that, I'll pass. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, just tagging on to that this is a process. It's like layers of an onion, and that not only can a higher power or love or a God, not only can our past be turned into good account, but that we just show up now and we try and practice every moment, trying to practice giving rather than getting. And when we slip up and we're back in get, that's just another opportunity. Somehow, whoever we're lining up with, God's using all of it for good. Our mistakes, as well as, our mistakes in the past and our current mistakes and our future mistakes, are all being used for good. And yeah, this complete shift from a life. When I got into recovery, my life was all about trying to get the life that I wanted, and leaving a lot of wreckage in my wake trying to get there, and a lot of suffering in my wake trying to make all that happen and to line everything up. So this shift from trying to get the life that I want to trying to live a life that's about others and being useful to others and being useful to our higher power. And then again, from here to do God's bidding or a higher power's bidding or love's bidding, that shift from going out to, do our own bidding to get the life that we think we need, rather than lining up with what our higher power wants from us in each and every moment. And this is a process that will continue. This is a layer by layer, as we go, and continue to practice these principles in all our affairs. So with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Nicole. Okay, I'm going to read the next paragraph. Now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. And I'll pass.
This is Tina in Idaho. So this statement, we have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. So all of the people on our 4th step inventory go to our 8th step list. That's going to be the list. And then, of course, they're reminding us that it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over our addiction, alcohol, codependency, whatever that is for each of us. So, because at this point, it's hard for some of us to think in terms of going out and um, making amends to others and approaching others and revealing where we have harmed others. But they're just reminding us that this is part of the deal. This is part of this path to freedom. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. This is Heather. I just wanted to kind of focus on the sentence. So we see it again. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. So very similar to the first paragraph that we read about step 6, that if we can't let go, we ask God to help us be willing. And so why is that important? Why is it that we must look at every person that we have harmed? Why can't we leave off a few? And I just want to refer back to page 66, where it says, if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these are poison. And so if we leave these amends undone, or we are afraid to do them, that's going to block our recovery. And like it says, anger is like poison to us. And so that anger again can start to fester and grow and put us right back into our addiction. So what we again have to do then is, if we haven't got the will in this moment, then we pray and turn to higher power until it comes. And I'll pass.
This is Tina in Idaho. My sponsor actually had me put people on my now, later, maybe, never list. And she had me start on someone, make amends to someone on my now list. And as I did my now list, people that were on my later list moved to my now list. And as I did the later list, people that were on my maybe list moved to my now list. And as I did my maybe list, people that were on my never list started moving to my now list as I began to experience the freedom that came with this, following these actions, taking these actions in the spiritual discipline. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, after step 8, on pages 76 through 83, goes through examples of amends that some of the people who wrote the Big Book were involved with. And there is instruction, and reading those pages is highly recommended. What we are going to do, since the people who wrote the Big Book gave their examples, is we're going to do our best, this podcast group, to give some of our own examples. After having me do a step 8 list, and my sponsor had me use the format that was just shared by Tina, he then instructed me to pick one person from my now list. Of course, once you're done with one, you go on to the next and the next and the next. But to pick a person from my now list and draft an amends, and then run that draft by him so that he had the opportunity to review that draft before I actually would sit down and share that amends with the involved person. So there was a opportunity to make sure that no further harm was being done. And remember that the words in the ninth step are made amends, direct amends to such others wherever possible, except when to do so would harm them or others. So my sponsor gave me a bit of a format. It had an introduction. I'm, Dave, I'm in a program of recovery from addiction, and part of that program is making amends wherever I have hurt other people. So it started with introduction and then went into the detail of what I was making amends for, and finished up with, is there anything that you would like to share with me? Is there anything I left out? Is there anything I have missed? And then take a position of listening at that point. So I was following a little bit of an example with that. And I have just two brief examples of amends to share. The first was an amends that I had in common with women whom I had had long-term relationships in my life. I had three examples in that circumstance because I had been married twice and was currently in a long-term relationship at that point. And one of the things, there were a lot of different things I made amends for to these women, but one of the things that was in common with all of them was my propensity, my defect, and my harm to place blame on them for anything uncomfortable, for anything that I didn't like how I felt when it took place. That I was always playing a victim. I was always being the one who was being wronged and that sort of thing. And this was a very you wouldn't think it'd be a difficult thing for me to own, but I was really, really awful at it. And what I did is I would seek out other people. So I also apologized to them, owned that I would seek the attention of other people and the support of other people through gossip. I would gossip about them as if I was the victim to them, looking for support in my victimhood. I would do this with counselors. I would do this with friends. I would do this with people in my life. And so that seeking of support in my victimhood and in that blaming the other person, that was something I had in common with pretty much all of my relationships that I needed to bring to the table. And then my anecdotal story, it says in the big book, a lot of people owe money. I, in my lifetime earlier, at an earlier age, had, as painful it is to admit, did some shoplifting. I'd actually stolen some things from sporting goods stores. I went back to a sporting goods store that I had stolen some things from. I think my motive was I thought I could get away with it. And I walked in and asked to speak to the manager. The clerk went and got him. He brought me back into his office with another person just to make sure he felt safe, that there were at least three people there, because he had no idea what I was up to. And I told him I had stolen these things. I told him what I thought they were that I could remember, and I had brought cash with me to give him, not only to pay him back for those things, but with interest. And I was ready to be busted. I was ready for him to turn me in. And he looked at me and he kind of grinned, and I couldn't figure out why he would be grinning. And he said, I know what you're doing. You're here for a ninth step, aren't you? And I said, yeah, how do you know about a ninth step? He said, I'm a 10-year recovered alcoholic myself. I'm glad you're here, brother. He said, I don't want your money, but I do have a suggestion, and that is that we have a charity here that teaches and helps kids who have no opportunity how to do some of the things that they would not otherwise have an opportunity to do. You feel free to donate as much to that charity as you would like. Here's the number, here's the link. And that just turned out to be an experience in my amends that I am really, really grateful that I followed up with. And with that, I will pass. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. This is Kathleen. I have a couple of examples. The first one is in my codependency. I was working. I do contract work, and I was working for a business, and one of my friends had secured the position for me, and I was doing work for her, and I was contracted. And I was in my codependency, I was listening instead of doing my work. I would go meet with this person and I would listen endlessly to and talk about drama and gossip and all, just stuff unrelated with work. And then I would still bill the company for all of those hours. And when I did my primary purpose amends, that CEO of that company was on the list because I had done that for a couple of years, and there were many hours I did not contribute work to the company, but I billed for it. And I thought that because it was the person that secured my contract with the company, that I should listen to them. And it was just completely in my codependency. And I contacted the CEO and met with him and told him that I had padded my invoices. I did not tell him that I was listening to one of his employees and talking with this person about drama. I did not bring that person into it at all, but I told him that I did not do all the work that I had billed for. And in that amend, he afterwards, he thanked me, and then he asked me, because I had referred to when I decided, when I presented that I was making an amends, I had said that I was in a 12-step program and I was making amends. I didn't do that with everybody. I would say not always 12 steps, just depending on the amend. In the relationship, talks about in these next few pages about not leading spiritually if it's or religiously if it's to not like turn anybody off. Or anyway, it's a great couple paragraphs. I highly recommend that you read it on page 77. But I chose to tell him I was in 12 steps, and after I made the amend, he said, tell me about that. Tell me all about that. Tell me about making amends and tell me about the 12 steps. And so it was really a really very challenging amend for me to make. I did not want to make it, but I was willing to go to any lengths. Had been so miserable that I did it. And then the next example I wanted to share was the absolute most scary one for me to do. And it was from a relationship a very long time ago. Um, and I had been living for decades, feeling like this person had abused me and he was not safe. And that's just how I framed the relationship. But I had cheated on him in that relationship. And that was my side of the street. And that it came up, because the resentment had come up, and then when I worked with my sponsor in 4 or 5, I realized, I also did the harm of I had put on my harms that I had cheated on him. And I didn't wanna call him, I didn't feel safe, um, but I was willing to go into any links, and I did find him on Facebook, so I was able to reach out to him and ask if I could give him a deliver an amends, and that, did he want me to do that, on the phone or in written form? And I got on the phone with him and I made the amends, and it was very challenging. And I uh, uh, ended up listening to him talk about stuff for probably, I don't know, I don't remember how long. I want to say 20 minutes, maybe longer. And I realized at some point, I was like, this is not, I made my amends. It's time to get off. I did not call to reignite any kind of a friendship or relationship with this person. The purpose was to make the amends. And I did my best to get off the phone, and I learned so much from that amends. And I learned that, I got to see again how, you know, I, how, how hard it is for me to, not just, or how hard it was for me to not just do what somebody else wanted to do, continue to talk or whatever. But that amends was definitely the linchpin for me. It changed my relationships with men. And it started on a trajectory that has led to, less and less and less codependency, and more and more living in my ideals and being useful and helpful and giving to give instead of giving to get. To this day, it was the linchpin of my recovery around codependency and relationships with men. Thanks. Heather, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, just to piggyback on what other people have said about kind of the process. What I learned in the process, I think, it's a lot of grace um, that I received from other people that I had harmed very significantly. And I could see in myself how I had used, it talks about we use God's kids to get our needs met. And that was very much me. And I would do it without consideration for anyone else. And so when I made my amends to my husband, um, I think that was really where I was able to see my side of the street and to apologize specifically for the behavior that I had during his drinking relapse, and the progression of his disease, the contempt and anger, and all of the feelings that I, would batter him with pretty much on a daily basis, was what I needed to make amends for in order for our relationship to come um, back to some kind of balance or equilibrium. And it was very hard because I had been very angry, but during my fourth and fifth step, I could really see how I had inflicted harm on him as well. Um, and just using him to make me look good or to validate, or for him to act in a certain way because that made me look good. All of those things that were just using other people, and being inconsiderate. And I think that was, it was my first amends. And I thank higher power just for the grace of the program and for both of us and being able to come together and do that. The second one I wanted to talk about was to my son. I didn't have any resentments towards my kids, but I had a huge list of harms. And when I talked to my youngest son and, expressed my sorrow, I didn't get a lot of into specific events, but I did talk about just how I had not been the mom that I wanted to be. Um, and again, it was, in consideration of others. And, again, I felt that grace from my son. And, being a father himself now, he said, like, I get it, Mom. Like, I know what you're talking about. I get it. But, still to be vulnerable like that with your children is, just really brings repair and healing back to the relationship. And I've seen, our relationship get better and better since, doing that. And with that, I will pass.
Thanks, Heather. So this is Nicole, and I'm thinking, as everyone was sharing about what the amends were like for me was that I had done a lot of apologizing in my life. Well, not a lot, but I did some. And that the difference between making an amends and all the apologies I had made in my life was my apologies were still about me. I wasn't really thinking about the other person and genuinely putting myself in their shoes. I was often scrambling because I was afraid whatever harm I had done, they wouldn't like me anymore, or I was going to lose them, or, a lot of image management and trying to, grab on to safety. And so I would apologize, but it did nothing to change my behaviors. There was nothing transformative about any apology that I ever made. And when I made the amends, and the second part of this is that I also live my life as a victim. I tend to play that role, I pick up that role. And I felt like the reason I was in recovery was because of other people. So once I had gone through my fourth and fifth step, I started to see that I was exactly the same as everybody that I had been blaming. I had the exact same thing that they had. I was doing the same stuff they were doing. I was just reaching for something different. And so with our amends, and also with apologizing, there would often be a caveat, like, I'm sorry I did this because of what you did. Like it was never just clean and just like owning my own stuff without focusing on somebody else. So making the amends was taking responsibility for my own behavior, and it was um the action that was this new ideal of not playing that victim role. And the way that I do that is by taking responsibility for myself and stop blaming other people. Well, I can think that all day long in my head, but it doesn't make any difference. The thing that changes it is taking that action to just take responsibility for myself, to disregard the other person entirely. And that's part of what we're doing here. And real quickly, the second amends that I did, just as an example of how our resentments are really only ever harming us. We think we're going to mad other people into changing, or we're going to mad other people into being different, or we're going to mad other people into wanting to come and apologize to us. But it doesn't work. And ultimately, it's like this flow of love is just, for me, it was completely cut off. Just, I couldn't experience love for these people. I experienced grief maybe, and I experienced, I don't know what, but it definitely, my ability to love was cut off. It was conditional, and it was get. And so this one amends that I had to do wasn't even to a live person. They were no longer here. And I was fighting it, like the resistance that came up. And so I did what's called a living amends. I wrote the amends, and then my sponsor offered that I could do the amends to her and essentially to that person and to my higher power. And I fought it. And I even called my sponsor and wanted to talk about all the reasons why I don't think I should be the one apologizing. And it just struck me as, oh my gosh, this is what they're talking about, like how imprisoned we are by our resentments, how much they had completely consumed my life, and me, and that resistance for me is absolutely a key. It's like a bell that goes off that lets me know this is a place where higher power wants me to free up. This is a place where I'm trapped. And to get that flow of love going. And that's never going to come by what I'm getting from another person. It's by what I'm willing to give. And so with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Nicole. This is Tina in Idaho. So the first amends that I want to talk about is related to what it says on page 77. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. It may be he has done us more harm than we have done him. And though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, we are still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It's harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. So I had amends to make to an important figure in my upbringing. And I hated this person, had been abused by this person. And my sponsor gave me very specific instructions. She said, you're going to say, you were the exact right caregiver for me, exactly what I needed. And to end with, I love you. And I was desperate enough that I did that. I made an appointment. I took that person out to a restaurant and I said precisely those simple words. And that person just collapsed into tears. It says on page 78, in 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the man we are calling upon admits his own fault. So feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. So that person said, no, 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 no. I harmed you, and this is how. And that, what happened though with that amends is I was free. I was free finally. I'd spent decades rehearsing this grievance, and it took up a lot of my energy and a lot of my thought and a lot of my time and a lot of my life force. and I got all of that back. And the other amends that I wanted to discuss were amends to my kids. The family that I was raised in, one of our addictions was image management. Um, it was super important how we looked in the community. And I um, did some of that with my own children. I was focused on how we looked instead of caring about them. I mean, I cared about them as well, but there was this motive that was there. And so I saw that I was actually using them at some, not always, and probably even not very often, but I was. And so I discussed making amends, direct amends with to them with my sponsor. And on the bottom of page 79, it talks about how we do this discussing our amends with our sponsor because we've got to figure out whether it will harm others when we make the amends. We don't want to do further harm. So my sponsor said it would be harmful to your kids to tell them that you'd been using them. So you're going to do a living amends, and you are going to love them for the people that they are and realize that they do not belong to you. They belong to love. They belong to the universe. They belong to higher power. And they're here to be and do what their higher power would have them be and do. And your job is only to support them in whatever way you can and to love them unconditionally and to give to them. And that completely transformed my relationships. That was actually, those were the first amends that I actually made. And, that was about 20 years ago. My son, who's now 42, was probably 15. And my relationship with them has stayed in the place of giving to give and loving to love and caring to care and supporting them to be the person that their higher power would have them be. And I pass.
Thanks, Tina. Okay, so pages 76 through 83 is where they give very specific instructions and examples for making amends. And then, as Dave said, we work with our sponsor to prepare amends and are given specific directions on how to go about it. So we're going to pick up at the end of that. We're on page 83, the last paragraph. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. And I'll pass.
This is Tina in Idaho. I just have a comment about one of the lines in those promises, and that is that feeling of uselessness and self pity will disappear. I did not even know how self pitying I had become. My self pity looked like self obsession, it looked like self loathing, it looked like self consciousness, it looked like self doubt, but mostly you could just describe it as um, obsessed with myself. I was always thinking about me and how I could um, get people to like me better or be more um, pleasing to others, or get liked, get loved, get attention. I was obsessed with me, and I didn't realize how small and tiny and um, my life had become. It was just so small. And this process did exactly what those promises state. Um, I began to, my whole outlook upon life did change. I realized that I was here for a purpose and that I was still going to continue to make mistakes, but the shorter period of time that I dwell in um self-pity or any kind of self when I make a mistake, the better, because um, I need to get back into the flow of living my purpose so that I can be reconnected to God and to my fellows, and living this life as it's said in the big book, to be this intelligent agent of God's ever expanding creation. That's the absolute best thing I can do for the people that I love. And with that, I'll pass.
This is Kathleen. Couple of things. Uh, we will see how our experience can benefit others. So, so long, so much of what was on our inventory, and we covered in step 5, uh, we have felt ashamed about. We've had secrets. We could never imagine, just talking just candidly and without any, without crumbling about some of the things that we had done. And these now become our assets, and they help people because now we have this way that we can connect with others that suffer like us. And we do that because we know we share the same problem and we share a solution. But now, I mean, know for me, there are so many things that were on my inventory that I will only do it if it's useful and helpful. But I wouldn't, I don't have any hesitation around telling any of them to anybody. And that's how it has transformed. Now I will not do that unless it's higher power directed and useful. I'm not going to stand on the mountaintop and say it just for the sake of saying it. But they are assets now. And when it is time to say it out loud, I don't have any hesitation, and there's no shame. Um, and also, it talks about fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. And so much of our, we get to this place after being, decades or however long in this disease, um, where people, we're just afraid of people. We've gotten triggered all the time, all over the place. We've been judged, or we think we've been judged, or whatever. And whatever, it's just everything has been a mess. Our relationships have been a mess. And we are angry. We've been angry and fearful at employers, at parents, at, um, you know, ex-partners and partners. And, we just have all this fear around people. We would, before recovery, we would interact with people and, we'd feel miserable afterwards. So a lot of times we just became so isolated because we were so obsessed with whatever it is what we're obsessed about, that people become this thing that we cannot handle. And this promise is talking about we're not going to be afraid of people anymore, because we're going to begin to live in the ideals of our higher power. And we're also, what comes with that is that all areas of our lives begin to clean up, which includes economic destruction, which many of us have. And we will begin to trust higher power. And it's, some of our amends are financial amends. And we will begin to give that over to our higher power. And our economic insecurity will leave us. And some of these things will be done suddenly, and some of them will be done slowly. And it references that here. Um, you know, so for those listening that might, still, have been in recovery for a while, and there might be an area of their lives that they still feel a lot of fear around or not trust, these things come slowly as we continue to do this recovery work on a day-to-day basis and grow this deeper connection with our higher power through being of service to others. And with that, I pass.
Thanks, Kathleen. Yeah, just wanted to comment about the codependent aspect of this, how trapped and unhappy and fearful and in self-pity and useless we are, when our entire moment to moment being, emotions, all of it is dependent on another person. When we make other people our higher power, and so and it's just jumping from emotion to emotion, depending on what we think, mostly not what's actually happening, but what we think is happening outside of us. We're just acting and reacting, and completely trapped. There's an enormous amount of freedom when we release the people, which it was never their job to begin with, to be our source of happiness, our source of freedom and joy, and our source of worth, and all of it. It was never meant to land there, so when we turn that stuff to a higher power, all of a sudden we're free to love the people that we've been trying to extract all this stuff from. The fear leaving is kind of a result of turning to this higher power, and if we're not reliant on people for our moment to moment happiness, then that fear begins to dissipate. So yeah, and that uselessness and self-pity will disappear, as long as we've been in the world and resentful of everything that's been done to us, and thinking that everyone else is the ones at fault, everyone else are the ones to blame, that uh, our stories don't really belong to us, right? It belongs to other people. And then when we own our stories, when we take responsibility for ourselves, then all of a sudden, like we were discussing earlier on in the podcast, that our past can be put to good use. Our past is no longer something for us to get out of. It's something that we can give to help others who are still out there struggling. And I'll pass.
Thanks, Nicole. This is Heather. I just wanted to do a quick referral back to page 52. So when I was working on my step 1, one of the questions my sponsor did with me was around the bedevilments on page 52, which are very similarly worded as the promises on page 84. And it says on 52, were we having trouble with personal relationships? We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy, and we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. And in that step 1 work, she said, so this is what it looks like when you're not connected to a higher power. And what I find very, miraculous about the whole program is that those bedevilments are then turned into promises on page 83 and 84, and that we lose those things, or those things are reversed. Those things no longer are what qualifies us to be in this program. And instead, through a relationship with our higher power, we get the promise of relief from those bedevilments. And with that, I'll pass.
Thanks, Heather. I'm Dave. I am in Oregon. It's a lot of promises there, and these people who work these steps are just reporting what their experience was when they followed the instructions and completed the instructions as given around amends, along with the first 8 steps. And I'll just pick one: fear of people will leave us. What we discover is that our experience is not in what other people think. That is other people's experience. What we begin to see is the truth. And the truth is that we, in connection with our higher power, can stand on our own 2 feet. We don't need to blow like a reed in the wind of the breeze of what somebody else says or what somebody else does or what circumstances bring. That we can stand with our roots planted firmly in a place where we know that we're bringing, we're giving, we're contributing, we have good motives, and that we are trusting and relying on our higher power as to what the results or the outcome is going to be from those things. That's a very different place from being obsessed and worried and concerned and making up what other people are thinking, what other people are feeling. Are we approved or not approved? Are we liked or not liked? Are we winning or losing? All of or going to lose, all of those made up things. And this becomes a position, what they describe is a position of freedom for us. We're no longer living in the trap of how we look and what our image is to others around us in our lives. And with that, I will pass. And I believe if we are done with our comments, Tina, do you have some comments?
I was going to read our close. Do you have comments, Dave?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, thank you for joining us today. Our next podcast will be on steps 10 and 11. You can find our meetings at primarypurposebigbookstudy.com. We meet each week on Sundays at 2 p.m. Eastern and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. Join us on the road of happy destiny.